Hey there, welcome to Hobby on YouTube, and part 2 of my look at Victorinox's new 1897 Replica, brought out to commemorate the 125th anniversary of this knife here in 2022. Before we get started looking at the knife, I just do want to mention that this was a big undertaking for Victorinox. It's not like they had a lot of old parts and materials laying around to make this knife. As a matter of fact, they had to recreate this knife by looking at old documents and sketches and examining just the few antique examples that are still around. They not only had to source materials they no longer use, but they had to recreate every blade and tool that goes into this knife. So it had to be a very time-consuming and expensive undertaking for Victorinox, and I would just like to say to them, thank you for doing this for the collector community. Okay, well, let's examine the exterior of the knife first. And first of all, it is 91 millimeters in length, which is historically accurate. Some of the old catalogs will tell you that it's 9 centimeters, but more precisely, this knife is and always has been 91 millimeters. But you'll also notice these special scales. And this is a faithful reproduction of the original scales. This is made out of what is called vulcanized fiber, and it's something they used before plastic was available. Now, vulcanized fiber is still made today. I Googled it, and there's several U.S. firms that are still producing it. It's called cellulose paperboard insulation. It's often used as electrical insulators. As a matter of fact, it's also called fish paper in the electrical grade. It is a chemically pure cellulose product that has no resins or binders in it. So very interesting. It's very hard. It can be shaped, milled, drilled, etc. And so kudos to Victorinox for sourcing that somehow and reproducing it. Now, I want to compare to a knife that I have, and a disclaimer, I do not have the very first model 1897. I do have a knife that dates somewhere between 1902 and 1909, which is a 3-layer model with a saw that they started offering that tool as well as scissors in 1902. But I just wanted to show you the similarities and differences in the scales. Now, you can see here this one is darker and smoother. That's probably due to 100+ years of existence. But it also, to me, seems a little more rounded. And perhaps those scales are a little thicker. Again, this knife's going to look a lot thicker because of the 3rd layer. The other thing you'll notice about this knife is there is no Victorinox nickel silver shield inlaid into the scale. So that is correct. The first version of this knife did not have the shield. The shield was not introduced until 1903, at which time it was optional, and then made standard in 1909 on the 25th Jubilee of the company. Also accurate are the 4 visible pins. Victorinox didn't hide their pins until 1957, and they went to 3 visible pins in 1909. So Victorinox got all that right. Let me talk about the materials just quickly. They, in this case, use nickel silver pins and I believe liners. There is a video from Victorinox online where a representative compares this replica to the original, and she speaks of the differences in the materials, and she does say that the liners are aluminum. But now that I have it in hand, I have to believe that these liners are nickel silver. Here is what Victorinox aluminum liners currently look like. And you can just see that this knife has liners that have a golden hue and sheen to them and a smoothness that looks an awful lot like nickel silver to me. We do know the pins are nickel silver, and here in hand the materials match up. So I'm thrilled about that. I was a little disappointed to hear that they used aluminum liners, but now that I have it in hand, I believe they're nickel silver, and I think that's wonderful. Historically, though, this knife could have had brass pins and brass liners, nickel silver pins and nickel silver liners, or nickel silver pins and aluminum liners. They actually did use aluminum liners back then, so had they put aluminum liners on this knife, it would not have made it historically inaccurate. Also, speaking about the materials, the main thing is the blade, tools, and springs are stainless steel rather than carbon steel as appeared on the original. I can understand Victorinox's decision to do this. I think it's threefold. Number one, they're completely set up to work with stainless steel these days. They probably do not have the tooling and the manufacturing processes in place to work with carbon steels, which are harder. They're not going to completely retool their factory to make a one-off collector's edition. Number two, the knife will stay looking nice for longer, and that's important to a lot of collectors and to a lot of people that are going to spend the money that is asked for this knife, and I'm going to talk about the cost in a little bit. The third reason I can think of for the decision to use stainless steel is just one kind of an anti-counterfeiting. You know, they use stainless steel also on their 125th anniversary limited edition of the model 1891 Soldier that came out in 2009. Everything else about that knife was historically accurate, other than they used stainless rather than carbon steel. I think one of the reasons they may do that is that you could never mistake these knives, these replicas, for the original that way. And there are a lot of unscrupulous people out there that might take one of these. It is so close in all other regards to the original that they could age it, patina it, or whatever, and maybe pass it on to an unsuspecting, maybe not so educated collector. And so with stainless steel tools, that completely negates that. Okay, let's start with the screwdriver first. And you'll see that it does not have a cap lifter, which is correct. But here's a great detail that Victorinox picked up and included. It is stamped with a German phrase that means illegally protected. I won't try to pronounce that. But this originally appeared on the knives when this was patented, and it didn't last for many years. It seems to be gone by the time we see the 1903 catalog. But anyway, that's great that Victorinox picked up on that detail and actually copied the font and stamped that onto these screwdrivers. Nice detail. Now the springs on this knife are more modern and of a more modern Victorinox design. It makes them, I think, a little softer and smoother, the action, which is good for, you know, saving your nails. Some of the older ones could have some real gator snap. Here's the correct older style can opener. You see this a lot on my channel. I call it the broken D or sickle style can opener. And just as an aside, I've had a debate with some viewers for years on how these things were actually used. But that debate is over, because in the Victorinox video that I mentioned, the woman actually, the representative of Victorinox, actually opens a can with this and shows the proper way that it was designed to open cans. Originally, cans were designed, it's actually a difference in the can design. Cans were designed to be opened near the top on the side. They actually had a softer seam here. You would insert this into the side of the can and then work your way forward like this. Cans are harder these days, so the representative from Victorinox, when she was demonstrating this, actually pierced the hole in the side of the can with the awl and then opened the can. I'm not going to do that with my brand new expensive replica. Now let's take a look at the blades. Let's look at the large blade first. Again, stainless rather than carbon. It seems to me to be a little narrow, but again, I do not have an 1897 to compare it to. Going back to my other knife, you can see that the blade is a little more narrow, but it is stamped correctly. It's stamped Elsener Swiss, Carl Elsener, the founder of the company, also the name of the cutler, and Schwyz, the canton in Switzerland where they were set up, and Ebach. These are, by the way, very sharp. The fit and finish, the build quality of this knife is immaculate. It's head and shoulders just above their regular production, I think. These knives could have actually two different stamps on the blade back then, and one could be Elsener Schwyz, and the other could be Army Swiss with the Swiss cross. I do have another example somewhere from between 1903 and 1909 where you do see the Elsener Schwyz stamp. Let's compare the two. I think Victorinox got that mostly right. There's some slight differences in the font, but it's pretty accurate. Now the small blade is correct in that it's a clip point blade and not a spear point blade, but I think the shape is maybe just a little off. Again, going back to my earlier knives, I believe that the very first version of the clip point blade was a little narrower, a little thinner, had a little less belly there, and a little less upsweep to the edge. It was also slightly swedged here, where the reproduction is not. This actually looks more like the second version of the clip point blade that you see on knives, you know, around in the 40s. This is a knife from the 40s, and it looks a lot closer to this. Here's that other knife that I have from 1903 to 1909. And again, this blade also seems, and this knife is hardly worn at all, so this blade would not be worn down. It is just a little more narrow and has a slightly different shape. But 95% there on the replica. Okay, the back tools, the awl I think is spot on from what I've seen with my knives and the catalog images and things on earlier ones. And I want to talk about the corkscrew because I had never seen this before. For a very short period of time, these original knives had a very different corkscrew. It is 6 turns rather than 5. It's not a coil. There is no hollow core to it. It's shaped more like a spring. So again, back to my other knife that I have to show you. You can see the difference. 5 turns here, actual coil with a hollow core there. So this was a departure for Victorinox to tool up to make this. I understand they had a very difficult time with it, as you can probably imagine. And again, just hats off to them for doing that. Now here on the liner you can see another special feature. They have engraved 1897 as well as your knife's number in its place among the 9,999. I just happen to have 8,134. So I would say this knife is 95% historically accurate. Some of the pluses there would be the composition of the scales, the 4 visible pin construction, no shield, the correct stampings, and the correct tools. Some takeaways from that historical accuracy would be the use of the stainless steel, of course, maybe the thinner scales, and the small blade shape. But all in all, I would say this is a home run. I'm extremely pleased with it. In my opinion, Victorinox really hit the cover off the ball with this knife. Okay, let's talk about cost, because that's the biggest negative for most people. This knife, when it was released, was priced at 399 Swiss francs. In Switzerland, here in the US, $500. I was a little dismayed to see that, 399 Swiss francs at $1.02 a Swiss franc comes out to be about $408. So I was surprised by that, but then I got to thinking, well, it probably cost Victorinox more to ship it over here. They probably have to pay import taxes and things like that. I was able to buy mine directly from Switzerland and had it shipped to me, and I saved about $100 in doing that. But I know this knife is not going to be for everyone at $500. That's a lot of money to pay for this small knife. There's no doubt about that. Why did I buy it? Well, because I'm a serious collector of these knives. You know that. You've seen my other knives. But I've been trying to collect the progression of this basic model of the Officers and Sports knife from Victorinox for years. And this is the only model that I do not have, the very first one. I've never had a chance to buy one. I now believe that if I ever had a chance to buy one, it would cost me at least $1,500 to $2,500. And so to be able to buy one that's a replica, but this historically close to the original for $400 and something just delights me. And as far as I'm concerned, it completes my collection. If you'd like to get one of these Victorinox 1897 replicas for yourself, they are still available here in the U.S. on Victorinox's U.S. website, as well as at several retailers, a couple of the larger being Smoky Mountain Knife Works and Knife Center. So I hope you've enjoyed that in-depth look at a very special knife. As always, thanks for watching, and have fun collecting.